The observation deck of the Concordia station hummed with the gentle thrum of life support systems, a sound that had become as natural as breathing to its inhabitants. Emily stood by the reinforced viewport, her small human frame dwarfed by the crystalline structure that separated her from the void. In her hands, she clutched a standard-issue water pouch, watching the swirling nebula beyond with wide, curious eyes. She was the youngest human aboard the station, barely 7 standard years old, and the crew had taken to calling her the Cub in the affectionate way that multi-species stations often adopted cross-cultural terms. Her father, Ryan, worked in the engineering bay 3 decks below, and Emily had been granted special permission to visit the observation deck during the station's rest cycle. Around her, various species went about their business. A Zelnari merchant discussed trade routes with a Corthian diplomat, their translator devices chirping softly. 2 Valine technicians calibrated sensor equipment near the far wall, their 6-limbed forms moving with practiced efficiency. Emily shifted her weight, mesmerized by a particularly bright star cluster, and her grip on the water pouch loosened. The container slipped from her fingers, tumbling through the air in the station's standard gravity. It struck the deck plating with a wet slap, rupturing on impact. Water spread across the floor in an expanding puddle. What happened next would become station legend. Before Emily could even register what had occurred, before her young mind could process the need to find a towel or call for help, the station erupted into coordinated chaos. Alarms didn't blare. There were no flashing lights. But every non-human on the observation deck moved with sudden, terrifying purpose. The Zelnari merchant abandoned his conversation mid-sentence, his chitinous plates rattling as he lunged for the emergency supply cabinet. The Corthian diplomat, whose species was known for their deliberate, philosophical nature, moved with startling speed toward the environmental controls. The 2 Valine technicians dropped their equipment worth more than most planetary economies and rushed toward Emily. Containment. One of them barked in their clicking language, though the translator rendered it in flat, urgent common. Within 3 seconds, a Valine had placed itself between Emily and the puddle. Within 5 seconds, the Zelnari had produced an emergency response kit. Within 7 seconds, station security, a hulking Dravic warrior whose species had conquered 6 star systems, came pounding through the doorway, weapons drawn. Emily stood frozen, confused, as alien faces filled with what she could only interpret as terror surrounded her. "Are you contaminated?" the Dravic demanded, his translator struggling to keep pace with his rapid speech. "Did the liquid touch you? Do you feel dizzy? Nauseous? Can you see properly?" I just dropped my water," Emily stammered, her voice small. The observation deck fell silent. The Zelnari merchant slowly lowered the biohazard container he'd been preparing. The Corthian diplomat's breathing apparatus wheezed with what might have been embarrassment. The Valine technicians looked at each other, then at the puddle, then at the small human cub who stood utterly bewildered by the response. "Water," the Dravic repeated slowly, as if the word were foreign. "Your water. Water, yes?" Emily's eyes were beginning to well with tears. She didn't understand why everyone was so upset. "I'm sorry. I'll clean it up. I didn't mean to." No, cub," one of the Valine interrupted gently, though its translator carried an edge of residual panic. "You must understand. On 47 known worlds, clear liquids that humans transport are invariably dangerous. We thought we believed." "You thought she was carrying acid," came a new voice from the doorway. Ryan stood there, his human face showing the particular expression of a parent who has arrived to find their child at the center of an interspecies incident. He carried a maintenance kit and wore the slightly exasperated look universal to fathers throughout the galaxy. "Emily, what did we discuss about bringing containers to the observation deck?" "To be careful," Emily mumbled, looking at her feet. Ryan crossed the deck and knelt beside the puddle, pulling a simple cloth from his kit. He wiped up the water with casual efficiency, while the assembled aliens watched in fascinated horror. To them, he might as well have been handling antimatter with his bare hands. "It's water," Ryan explained, standing and wringing out the cloth into a waste receptacle. Dihydrogen monoxide. We drink it. We're mostly made of it. It falls from the sky, on our homeworld. The Zelnari's translator stuttered, as if the device itself refused to believe what it was processing. Falls. From the sky? Falls. 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 From the sky. Yes. In vast quantities. Sometimes frozen, sometimes liquid. Our cub here needs to drink approximately her body weight in it every 10 days to survive. Madness, the Korthian diplomat breathed. On my world, such a substance would be classified as a universal solvent. It does corrode things, Ryan agreed cheerfully. It's actually pretty good at it over time. We just evolved to handle it. Our bodies are about 60% water. The Dravik warrior made a sound that might have been a whimper. His species came from a desert world where moisture was death, where water meant rust, decay, and the dissolution of carefully maintained environmental seals. Emily looked up at her father, then at the assembled crew, who had responded with such terrifying efficiency to protect her from what they perceived as a catastrophic chemical spill. Understanding dawned slowly in her young mind. You thought I was hurt, she said softly. You all came to help me. The Valine, who had placed itself between her and the puddle, literally shielding her with its own body, clicked softly. Of course, cub. You are part of this station. We protect our own. Even though you were scared of the water? Especially because we were scared, the Exelnari said. Courage is not the absence of fear, young one. It is action, in spite of it. Ryan placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. What do we say? Thank you, Emily said, her voice stronger now. Thank you for trying to save me. The observation deck slowly returned to normal. Equipment was retrieved, conversations resumed, and the emergency crew stood down. But something had shifted in the way the aliens looked at the small human cub. Later, in the station's mess hall, Ryan found himself surrounded by crew members wanting to understand more about humans and their bizarre relationship with universal solvent. He patiently explained hydration, rain cycles, and the concept of swimming, which caused 3 species to excuse themselves for stress-relieving meditation. Emily sat nearby, carefully drinking from a new water pouch, and watched the galaxy turn beyond the windows. She understood now why humans had earned their reputation among the stars. Not because they were fearless or powerful or technologically superior, but because they had survived, even thrived on a world where the substance that dissolved stone and corroded metal fell freely from the sky, where they had evolved to carry that substance within their very cells, to crave it, to depend on it, and more importantly, she understood why the emergency crew had reacted as they did. In the vastness of space, among the 1,000 species that called the Concordia station home, there existed a fundamental truth that transcended biology or chemistry, or the particular composition of anyone's homeworld. When a cub spilled her water or what you believed might be acid, you didn't calculate the risk. You didn't debate the proper protocol. You moved. You protected. You acted. That, Emily thought as she sipped her water, was perhaps the most human thing of all. And it was a lesson that humanity, in its stumbling, dangerous, water-drinking way, had taught the galaxy, even if it took a spilled drink to remind everyone.